for PCCD to administer at the state level, but it is a complex funding stream for all of you at the local level who are managing the grants. And given the fact that STOP was just reauthorized in 2022, there's some new certifications and there are some updates that we wanted to give you. We ourselves had to attend a training from OVW to do a similar thing to make sure all of us at the state level were aware of everything we needed to do. And we just thought that this was a good opportunity to give you a refresher on some of the requirements that you have under STOP. And I kind of liken this to every time, you know, you go to get an update on your iPhone, or you get those letters in the mail from the credit card companies telling you there's an update to your terms and agreement. And then it's usually a 5-page long thing in, you know, 10 font with a million requirements. And it can be overwhelming. And sometimes you just don't even read it. Well, what we're trying to do with this webinar today is we've read those letters in that fine print, and we've extracted some of the things that we think that you need to pay attention to as you manage your STOP grant. So you will be hearing not only from me, but from 3 members of my staff. You know, over the years, actually, we have more people working on STOP now than we've ever had before, and some new faces. So I wanted to give them an opportunity just to also introduce themselves, and they will be sharing the presentation with me. So our goal today is really to refresh your memory regarding STOP grant conditions, discuss some new requirements that start this year as a result of the VAWA 2022 reauthorization. We want to give you an update on our monitoring plans for the rest of this year and next year. And we also wanted to kind of give you an introduction to a technical assistance tool that we've been working on here at PCCD with our partners at the state level. That would be PCAR, PCADV, Chiefs of Police, the District Attorneys Association, and the Administrative Office of the Pennsylvania Courts. What this technical assistance tool is for is to help counties develop holistic response protocols to both sexual assault and domestic violence. I will turn it over to Desiree Myers, who's a new member of our office. And she's going to talk a little bit about the federal requirement around breach of personally identifiable information.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Desiree Myers. Like Natalie said, I have been with the Office of Victim Services and the grants side of it for about a year now. Prior to that, I did work in VCAP for a little while, and then before that, I was in the field at a domestic violence program. I will be covering the breach of personally identifiable information, more commonly known as the PII. Now, all of us have heard of instances where hackers are breaking into government information systems. Sometimes there is extensive harm done to the general community. And as noted on the slide here, PII is any information that can be used to identify a person, whether by itself or in combination with other personal information. This can include anything like social security numbers, addresses, phone numbers, birthdays, any of that particular identifying information is included in PII. This federal requirement has been in place for a few years. So some of you may already have been asked by PCCD to create and implement a PII policy. The applicant agency and any pass-throughs that are receiving money through the STOP grant have been asked to have a PII policy. The requirements are that if your organization suspects a breach or confirms that an actual breach has occurred, you do have the obligation to report that to PCCD within 24 hours of this discovery. If it is discovered, you can find your contact for your grant in eGrants under Program Contact, and we're requesting that you reach out to us either by phone or email to advise us of that breach that might have occurred. Once we are made aware of that breach, we do have that obligation to notify the Federal Office on Violence Against Women, who is within the Department of Justice. And I will turn it over to Tanya.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tanya Bauer, and I've worked at PCCD for about 4 years now. And before that, I was working in victim services. So I'm sure I've talked to a lot of you before. So I'm happy to be here today and to speak with all of you briefly about this. The next thing we're going to briefly talk about is confidentiality. There's nothing particularly new about confidentiality, but just as a reminder, under VAWA, which the STOP program is authorized under, there are strict confidentiality requirements. STOP grantees and their pass-through organizations have an obligation to ensure the safety of victims by protecting the confidentiality and privacy of persons and clients who receive STOP funded services. Each representative on the team operates within different parameters regarding information they may share with the team, as well as their obligations as mandated reporters. Some of those parameters are defined by law in the instance of victim services, or others just by policies. Each team should be discussing these parameters of their confidentiality at your STOP meetings, because again, survivor safety is the keystone of the team discussions and is key to any successful cross-system collaboration. So next slide. Overall, though, the critical thing to remember under confidentiality under VAWA is that you as a grantee can't release information about a victim receiving STOP funded services. So for example, you're discussing something specific in a STOP team meeting about a client, that information shouldn't be taken outside of that meeting. There are exceptions under VAWA, which are listed here. When a court or a statute compels the information to release, for example, mandated reporting laws, when there's reasonable suspicion of child abuse. And also when a victim provides written consent. So the next slide talks a little bit about what should be included under the in the criteria for the consent to release. So these are probably familiar to you as well, but grantees and employees working under the STOP grant should request and discuss not only what the ramifications are, good and bad, of making of doing a consent to release. Once the victim and the grantee agree on what information will be shared and who it will be shared with, the agreement should then be put in writing and contain a duration of time for when it is effective, so time limited. And then obviously the consent should be signed by both parties. So the next new condition is the prohibition against trafficking. So this applies to all the agencies receiving STOP funds and any pass-throughs. This prohibits, just as you might imagine, engaging in any forms of trafficking, including the purchase of commercial sex, engaging in forced labor with any of your employees, or anything that supports or advances trafficking in persons. So what trafficking in persons mean, which is on the next slide, is that any of these items, there's more in the law if you're interested, but generally it's confiscating documents or refusing to pay for transportation to back to the home country if the employee is recruited, which I don't really think is the case that often, but it's just a new certification that they wanted to point out. hiring somebody under false pretenses. There are a bunch of things there. So while this type of work and structure of STOP grants doesn't immediately lend itself to possible violations of this condition, they extend to the employees of organizations receiving STOP funded and to contractors. So if one of your employees or a STOP funded contractor is found to be engaging in any of these practices, it could affect your eligibility for STOP. So I'm going to pass it back over to Natalie now.
Thank you, Tanya. I apologize, but I forgot at the very beginning of this to tell you that we will send you a copy of this PowerPoint. I knew there was something that I wanted to say, but I did, just so you don't have to be frantically writing. But the other thing that you know, I wanted to say is that there's a number of fairly new things that have come through that are requirements, and you know, some of them pertain not only to STOP, but they also pertain to VOCA. So this particular thing that I'm going to be talking about here, determination of suitability to interact with participating minors. Some of you may have already seen this because just about all of you have VOCA grants with us. So over the past year, you know, both VOCA and STOP funding streams have clarified the requirements around clearance check for funded employees who might have job duties that have them interacting with children and adolescents. So I'm certain that all of you and also the police departments, all the partners on your team have some type of procedures and policies in place to screen job applicants and employees via criminal background checks and child abuse clearances. But at the federal level, things have gotten a little bit more extensive in terms of the types of checks that you have to do. And the key question really is, do any of your STOP funded activities have the purpose of benefiting minors? And I just want to, you know, point out that STOP is a little bit different from VOCA because STOP is very clear that it can only serve victims age 11 and up. So really with STOP, there really shouldn't be any types of activities that focus exclusively on children. Now, however, there are a lot of your STOP projects that, you know, may have a component to work with adolescents or do dating violence prevention or outreach and types of things like that. Just remember, STOP funding age 11 and up. So as I note here, the key question that as a STOP grant administrator you need to ask is, you know, is there a funded activity or objective in my grant that would be for children and adolescents? So if the answer, you can go to the next slide, Brian, thanks. So who does this apply to? So like all the requirements under STOP, it applies not only to the agency in the county that's applied for the STOP grant, that holds the STOP grant, but it also goes to any of the other agencies that are getting some of the money from the STOP grant. And if the answer to the question on the prior slide is yes, then this applies to the applicant agency and any pass-through agencies on the STOP grant. It applies to any STOP-funded individual who is likely to have contact with minor children during the course of their work. Next slide. Now, how do I comply? So in order to comply with this requirement, the applicant agency and pass-through agencies should have policies in place that really set the criteria for identifying what positions at their agencies qualify under this condition. And what's on this slide here is just some resources for you. You know, essentially, you know, as long as you're in compliance, your policies are in compliance with Pennsylvania Child Protective Services law, and, you know, making sure you're getting appropriate clearances and the mandated reporter training if it's relevant to the position. Also, we listed a couple of websites here, both state and national, that will give you some more information if you're interested or need further technical assistance. Next slide, please. So what we're really looking for here for STOP grantees to do is, okay, the first threshold is there an activity or a STOP funded staff person who may be interacting with children and adolescents? If there is, you have a policy, you know, to determine which of your employees on the grant might fit that criteria. Then once you have done that, what we're looking for is some type of documentation that you did all the background checks that are required. So this is documentation that you need to do every 5 years. So if you have an employee that's worked, that is a long-term employee, you know, you can't just do the background check when you want to hire them. If they're there 5 years later, you got to do it again. And so agencies will be required to complete the suitability to work with minors tracking sheet, and PCCD will review it during the monitoring process. So I've put a link in here, and remember, we're going to send this document out to you. It should look familiar because it's the same tracking sheet that we're using for VOCA. So also, I see some questions are coming in the chat, and that's really good. What we're going to do is we're going to pull down those questions. We may be able to answer them in real time, but I promise you that we will answer all the questions, and we'll make sure we get the answers back to all of you so that you can access them. So if you could go to the next slide, Brian. So we're providing this worksheet for guidance. So what it does is, can you go to the next slide, Brian? Here's the worksheet. And like I said, this was sent out to VOCA grantees. But what we've tried to do is we've tried to make a column for every website and area that you need to be checking on by employee. We seem to have lost the PowerPoint. Something like this always happens. Let's see. Give it a second. There we go. Thank you. Okay, if you look at this, one of the things that's different is it's asking you to check some national clearance sites in addition to what you would have customarily checked in the past for just Pennsylvania, and of course the Pennsylvania State Police background check. And of course, you know, if you were hiring someone who hadn't lived in Pennsylvania very long, I think if they hadn't lived in Pennsylvania for the past 5 years, then you were obligated to do the FBI fingerprint-based criminal history search. So now you have to do all of these searches. And then, of course, there's a place for you to mark whether you have determined them to be suitable or not. So what you want to do is just keep this documentation, and you know, if your grant meets the criteria, then when staff come out to monitor, they will ask to see this.
And the next section is another recent STOP grant condition. This is workplace-related incidents of VAWA crimes. This would apply to any applicant agency as well as pass-through applicants. The conditions of this were made aware to applicants whenever the most recent competitive solicitation from PCCD was released. And it includes a policy that has to include how to report allegations of workplace-related incidents of sexual misconduct, domestic violence, dating violence, and that can be an employee, volunteer, consultant, or contractor. The policy should identify what steps the employee, volunteer, consultant, or contractor can take to report sexual misconduct, domestic violence, or dating violence. And it should also offer supports for those affected employees, as well as outline the process for addressing the complaints. If that complaint merit is found, the person violating the policy must be prohibited from holding positions that could undermine the ability of the applicant agency or pass-through to carry out the goals and objectives under the STOP grant. There is a hyperlink included on this particular slide, so whenever this is sent out, if you want any more information on it, you can go to this slide and select that hyperlink for additional information. So how would you comply with this? This will be done during the monitoring process. The policy must be made available for our review, and we do recommend that STOP funded staff receive information on this policy at least once during the life of the project. Now, we will only be reviewing to assess the 3 requirements of OVW. We won't be looking at the quality or the legality of the policy. So we do suggest working with your legal or human resource department on that particular matter. And I will turn it over to Mike.
I've been working for the Office of Victim Service for about 2 years, and I've been working on STOP grants for a little over a year. Prior to that, I spent about 20 years in residential juvenile justice. It's nice to see you all here and to put some faces to the names. Over the next several slides, we're going to talk about requirements for using STOP funds trainings. Funds can either be used for sending staff to state or national conferences, or can be used to hold a training in your county. Bringing in subject matter experts to provide training to local responders. If specific trainings have not been identified in your grant project budget, you must reach out to your program contact for prior approval. Next slide, please. Sending a staff to a conference, you need to send an email to your program contact for prior approval. The exception would be if the training was specifically identified in the budget when the application was submitted. Please include the following information in your email request: the name and date of the conference, organization sponsoring the conference, the agenda, personnel you wish to send, estimated cost of the conference, and a brief explanation of how it will benefit your STOP project. Next slide, please. Likewise, if you wish to host a training which was not specifically identified in the application budget, you need to send an email to your program contact for prior approval. Please include the following information on your email request: the date of the training, location, the target audience, estimated costs, trainers and topics, estimated number of attendees, and how you will collect feedback from attendees on their experience. Next slide, please. The Office of Victim of Violence Against Women has some strict rules about STOP funds for training and conferences. Eligible expenses include travel and lodging, subsistence, meals that are not provided at the conference itself, conference room rental, audio-visual equipment, printed materials, external trainers and facilitators, and stationery supplies. Ineligible expenses include meals and refreshments served at the conference, which is an important distinction, trinkets, entertainment costs, and trainings that focus exclusively on child abuse and in child abuse investigations. As Natalie pointed out, STOP funds are for victims age 11 and up. Generally, food and beverage conference can't be paid for under STOP. However, you can provide per diem for attendees to get their own lunches, dinners, and breakfast. There are very limited exceptions to the restrictions on food and beverages. Please see the link on this slide for further information, or you may contact your OVS contact for more information. In the past, several STOP grantees have requested to use STOP funds to provide training that is predominantly focused on child abuse, mandated reporter, and child abuse investigation. As a reminder, STOP formula grant funding can only be used for programs for victims age 11 and older. However, training costs can be prorated if portions of the training are focused on child abuse investigations. Again, you can reach out to your OVS contact if you have questions. Next slide, please. Remember that the maximum consultant rate is $650 a day or $81.25 an hour. When requesting a particular consultant whose rate exceeds your daily rate, you must consider these 4 requirements before making your request to PCCD. Some things to remember when identifying consultants. Essential
Excuse
things
me,
are.
could you go back a slide? I'm sorry, we got ahead of ourselves.
Oh, did I miss one? I apologize.
There you go, that's the right one.
Oh, okay. I'm on the right one. Okay. So some things to remember when identifying consultants for potential trainings are: do you have documentation to support your selection process, such as invoices and resume? Are the consultants legitimate? In other words, do they have the requisite skills and expertise for the subject? Was the search fair? Did you consider more than one individual? Is the compensation rate reasonable and comparable? Next slide, please. This is a reminder that OVW has established guidelines for training supported under the STOP grant. It's helpful to keep these in mind when you are planning a training. These guidelines include: trainings must be in compliance with federal law to include prohibition of discrimination. Training content and material must be accurate and applicable to the program objectives. Trainers must have experience and expertise on the subject matter. Grant recipients should do their due diligence confirming the trainer's experience and expertise prior to the training. And trainers should demonstrate professionalism and respect. Slide, please. Publications disclaimer is not a new requirement, but it is something to be reminded of, as it can be easily forgotten. If a program uses STOP funds to support any types of materials, for example, to upgrade your website, to create brochures, or to create training materials, the disclaimer must appear somewhere on those materials. And the next slide will be disclaimer. Basic purpose of this disclaimer is to indicate that the materials provided do not reflect the views of the Commonwealth or the Department of Justice. And this particular specific disclaimer will be available when we provide the slideshow. Thank you. Next slide. I think it's Natalie.
Thanks, Mike. So here's where we get into probably the biggest thing to come out of the 2022 VAWA reauthorization. There's now a new certification, a federal certification. Those of you who have been doing STOP for a while know the other certifications, that a victim can't be billed for a forensic rape exam, no polygraphing of sexual assault victims, no charges for protection orders, etc. So they have added this new federal certification that pertains to prosecution. And before everybody gets too too upset about this. Don't worry, because they have given some time for states and subgrantees to meet this federal certification. Now, this certification discourages the use of practices that compel victim testimony. Next slide, please. So up to now, all of you remember that the STOP grant has always encouraged grantees to use evidence-based prosecution and investigatory practices. By instituting this new certification, I believe that OVW is really amplifying the seriousness of this requirement. So neither OVW nor PCCD expect everybody to shift their practices and meet this certification overnight. So the certification gives grantees 3 years, beginning this year, to number one, plan, develop, and implement training by experts in the field regarding victim-centered approaches to violence against women cases. Then to put policies that support a victim-centered approach informed by such training into practice, and then also create a protocol outlining alternative practices and procedures for material witness petitions and bench warrants that shall be exhausted before employing material witness petitions and bench warrants to obtain victim witness testimony. So basically what this is saying is you have to have a plan for trying every other alternative, and putting the victim, making the victim testify and come to court should be the last recourse. The Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association they have received a STOP grant from PCCD. And for the past 2 years, they have been working with an advisory group to put together a training that will cover a lot of these issues for its membership. The first of these trainings is going to be held November this year, and they plan to repeat it in November of 2024. So they are working with us to help meet this certification, and we value their partnership in doing so. Next slide, please. And then the next thing that I wanted to talk about, maybe some of you have heard some rumors that this is coming, but what we have been working on with our statewide partners, PCAR, PCADV, the Chiefs of Police, the District Attorneys Association, and AOPC, we've been meeting for about 2.5 years to work on these protocol development tools. And the whole purpose of doing this is something that we, PCCD, had wanted to do for quite a long time, but we never had the resources to do so. Everyone, everyone who's gotten STOP funding for as many years as STOP funding has been available in Pennsylvania has been required to develop protocols, response protocols. And I think that one of the things that we needed to do was really pull everybody together and outline what exactly needed to go into those protocols, so that both sides, you as the grantee and we as monitors, are clear on what we're looking for and what should be contained in these really important documents. So what these protocol development tools will do, there's one for sexual assault and one for domestic violence. What they do is they provide a detailed template to help counties develop comprehensive, multi-system response protocols. I also want to note that these tools were given to some folks in the field just to take a look at and give us a reality check. We've also pulled in some outside experts to take a look at some of the materials that are offered in the tools as technical assistance guides. So we are excited to introduce these protocol development tools. We anticipate that there will be another webinar like this, and I know you guys are all clapping with joy for that, but we do want to hold kind of a kickoff webinar, and we will have folks who were on the statewide work group to help develop this, and we will present it to the field and kind of give you the high level view of it and show you how to use it. Now, I will tell you that over the next year and a half, PCCD is expecting that all currently funded STOP counties will use this tool to revisit the content of their current webinars. I want to make it very clear too that we're saying revisit. Everyone who's present on this webinar has used their team and worked really hard to develop their county's protocols. We appreciate and value that. But what we do want you to do eventually when you get this tool is to use the tool to compare what you have existing. You don't have to start from scratch. But if there are things in the tool that are not covered in your protocols, we will ask you to add them to your protocols. And then finally, as I said, probably by the end of June, we will hold the webinar to officially introduce the tools. And then it is our plan to provide counties with a variety of technical assistance and extra learning opportunities from now until when this batch of STOP grants ends in December 31st, 2025. So I want to, make it clear that we're not just going to hand you this thing and say, okay, do it, everyone. That's not our goal. We want to make sure that we provide the appropriate assistance and technical support for you. And we hope that you will find these tools valuable. So the last thing I want to touch on is the on-site monitoring. We are going to be monitoring STOP grants. We've already started this year, and then it's our goal to monitor every currently funded STOP grant by the end of 2024. Some of you have already received contact from me and my staff asking to set up those monitoring visits. We haven't changed our monitoring tool or anything. As you know, we do it electronically. We use Microsoft Forms. And basically what we wanted to do was make sure that there was a way that we could do the STOP monitoring without putting the burden on the project director to try to get all the information from everybody, put it together and send it back to PCCD. So it's kind of a decentralized web-based tool that all of the funded partners, law enforcement, prosecution, victim services can complete independently and then just send back electronically before the monitor comes out. It's also our goal to attend at least one of your STOP collaborative team meetings. We realize that it's really hard to coordinate that to occur simultaneously with the monitoring. So it may be that me or one of my staff attends one of your STOP meetings, and then the monitoring doesn't occur until a little bit later. So that's what we're looking at in terms of monitoring. And on our STOP section of the website, we'll publish a schedule so that you're aware of whether you'll be monitored in 2023 or 2024. And if we could go to the next slide. What we've provided here is our contact information in case you don't have it. If you have a STOP related question, feel free to reach out to me or any of my staff. If we don't have the answer immediately, we'll get back to you, but we will make sure we provide you with the information that you need. And, you know, we appreciate everything that you do. I know that there were a lot of questions coming through, in particular, some questions about how to use the documentation of the suitability to work with minors form, if you could put your VOCA and your VAWA funded personnel on the same sheet, etc. We haven't gotten that far, so once we discuss it internally, we'll get that answer back to you. And I see some questions here. If you'll just bear with me, I will try to answer the ones that I feel fairly confident that I can answer right now. And then some of the other ones, I just may have to go back, take a look at a few things and make sure that I have the information right. So Angela Keene is asking, hi, Natalie, will PCCD provide model policies and practices? One of the things, and I think is a particular selling point of the protocol development tools that we're going to be releasing, is in addition to outlining the relevant legislation, federal and state, that you need to consider when writing your protocols, it also provides links. And the beauty of bringing all of our statewide partners together was that everybody was able to bring to the table the technical assistance materials that they've developed. And if we needed to, we've put the technical assistance materials right in the tools. We've also put links to technical assistance documents and helpful websites from OVW, from some of OVW's national technical assistance providers, as well as the statewide partners. So that when you're sitting there with your STOP team, you're looking at these particular sections of the protocol, you can access those materials right away. We've also built discussion guides into the protocol development tools, as well as at times some videos that you can use that offer you a way to discuss things like your mission, like how to deal with conflict and some other things that you can actually use at a STOP team meeting and use to take you through some of the processes that you need to go through. So yes. So in terms of my question refers to slide 29, victims testifying in court. In the protocol guides, there are links. So the answer is partially yes. There will be information about promising and best practices, but we also hope that the prosecutors who attend the PDAA training in November and also in November of 2024, they will be bringing in some national experts to talk about how you do evidence-based investigations and overview of trauma and various other things. Is there any anticipation of an increase in STOP funding? At the present time, I am not aware of that, Suzanne. I do know that with the reauthorization of VAWA, there was some additional money placed into sexual assault services. I am not sure whether the sexual assault services would probably be in the sexual assault services program, SASP, and some of the other funding opportunities that are really focused on responding to sexual assault. But I believe that STOP funding will probably be level. At least that's what the indicators and the information they've shared with us points to. As far as getting the STOP monitoring schedule posted, that can happen as soon as the our wonderful administrative officer, Leah, can get them up on the website. So we'll try to get that up by the end of the week.
Natalie, can I follow up to my questions?
Sure.
When the DA's Association does the training for prosecutors, will they be including advocates and or maybe law enforcement, since this is a collaborative funding stream? Like, is there a way to maybe for all of us to be at the table together to train together as well?
That I'm not sure of. At the current time, I'm not aware that they would be inviting others besides prosecutors, Tanya. Yeah, Tanya. Angela.
I know you know my name.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that. However, the other thing to keep in mind is you use the next year and a half and you use that protocol development guide, it kind of forces you to have some of those conversations,
Yeah.
but in a very, I don't want to say controlled, but in a guided way. There are discussion prompts in there, and that way you can work through some of those things. Obviously, if there are any issues, we do plan to have bi-monthly calls where, you know, people can just call in if they have some items they want to discuss or some challenges that they're having, and we'll have members of the work group hopefully on those calls to try to help answer questions and navigate some of those issues.
Okay. Thank you.
We
Good to
also
see you.
yes, we also anticipate, we're working on putting together a statewide grantee meeting for September of 2023. We haven't had one of these for STOP grantees in a number of years. And of course, the pandemic had a lot to do with that. But we are, you know, consciously working on the agenda for that and trying to get speakers in to address not only the new certification, but also some of the training issues that have been brought up to us repeatedly, whether it was through the focus groups for the STOP implementation plan. I know PCAR, PCADV have, you know, they're always checking to see what the topics are that people most need. And, you know, we're just trying to build an agenda that will be useful to you, given all that we've presented here. Okay, so we'll take these questions. And honestly, you have our emails and you have our phone numbers. If you, once you take a look at this PowerPoint and you have some time to digest it, if there's anything else that occurs to you, please reach out to us and we'll be happy to take your questions then as well. Okay, well, this is really good. We'll give you back 15 minutes of your day. That's always exciting when you finish early. But anyway, truly, thank you all for your time. And if anything occurs to you after this, please contact one of us. We'll be happy to help. I hope you have a good rest of the afternoon. Bye.
Thank you all.